Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on media, focusing on the impacts of globalisation. Sociologists offer many different definitions of globalisation and how it has impacted on society. The most basic definition offered is that globalisation is the process of the world becoming more interconnected and developing greater similarity. Globalisation has been aided in no small part due to technological advancements, especially in the media, and through greater communications technology, which has had many positive impacts on nations globally. In this video, we're going to look at the ways in which globalisation has impacted on the cultural, political, and economic organisation of different nations, and the role the media has played in changing these aspects of global society. Perhaps the most obvious way in which the media has facilitated the process of globalisation is through cultural globalisation. From the end of the Cold War in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the media has been prominent in transmitting cultural values of Western nations to other parts of the world, particularly those once controlled by communist nations. This has led to an increased demand for and consumption of Western goods, according to Crothers, who highlights how globalisation has created a culture of conspicuous consumption. Before digital media, this was promoted through advertising of goods in traditional media and through promoting values of consumerism in both fictional and non-fictional programming. TV programs focused on lifestyles of those in the West helped to transmit attitudes and values that led to a demand for designer brands such as Nike, Coca-Cola, Levi's and others. With the growth of digital media, this has been accelerated, with consumption of Western goods increasing and inspiration for new consumer goods being influenced by companies in other nations. The growth of global lifestyle brands has been accelerated by forms of social media such as TikTok, Instagram and Facebook, and has led to a global consumerist culture. Political globalization is another form of globalization that has been aided by media sources. Political globalization can be evidenced in the period following the Cold War, as nations developed greater cooperation and had more similarity in their approaches to dealing with global issues, for example climate change, the war on terror and economic crises. The media had been effective in spreading a more unified political view in the latter part of the 20th century, although critics would argue that this has since decreased, and the political globalization is in reverse in the aftermath of global crises such as the war on terror, the global credit crisis, and reactions to climate change in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the media does play an important role in promoting both critical and consensus views. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the media was used to transmit information about dealing with the crisis and making comparisons with other nations' approaches. Furthermore, the media plays an important role in transmitting information about current global crises, for example conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. Although the extent to which people accept these views is often debated, with many critics suggesting that dominant narratives are rejected in the age of social media, where individuals can access a range of sources and see critical views of the actions of different states, creating a greater awareness of human rights violations. A third form of globalization is economic globalization, and this refers to the way in which world economies have become more interconnected, from improved trade relationships between nations and demand for goods and services from other nations. The media has played a large part in creating demand for these goods through advertising and through the growth of online retailing, which enables individuals to see products, compare prices, and purchase goods they may not have otherwise been able to get. The growth of online retailers such as Amazon are evidence of economic globalization, whilst the spread of other TNCs to formerly closed markets has seen a growth in their influence and wealth. A further impact of economic globalization is the way in which many financial markets are interconnected, and this has been evidenced through economic crises such as the global credit crisis of 2008 and the increased cost of living from 2021 onwards. The media keeps individuals informed of such events and disseminates information on these rapidly. This can have negative impacts on market confidence and have negative impacts on the economy, For example, reactions to the UK mini-budget of 2022, which saw Prime Minister Liz Truss's tenure come to an end after just 49 days, having cost the UK economy an estimated £30 billion, as speculation caused increases in interest rates and the collapse of the pound against other major currencies. The media amplifies many of these forms of globalization as it creates instant connections with other nations, and individuals are provided with a broad range of media sources from which to gather information. Bell argues that a global media is able to spread these messages rapidly, and this has impacts on the culture, politics, and economics of nations as the audience reacts to messages that are transmitted. Postmodernists argue that a feature of global society is this media saturation, which bombards individuals with different messages from which they select which to interpret and act upon. Yet others would argue that perhaps this individual interpretation is overstated, and that dominant messages are still transmitted to the masses, and rather than creating a unified and integrated global culture, it has created an extension of Western culture. Globalization has also impacted on the media. Rather than have national and local media, there's been a growth of global media conglomerates. For example, in the UK, most news is accessed through social media platforms controlled by global tech companies, Meta, Google or Alphabet, and X Corp. Whilst pluralists argue that global media offers individuals lots of alternatives to these companies, it also creates divided opinions on issues. However, pluralists argue that a truly global media presents a greater representation of the different cultural norms and values from around the world, and individuals can draw upon these to form their own view of society. In contrast, cultural imperialists suggest that the media transmits a dominant ideology based upon Western values, and that the media and new media is simply a tool for the ruling class to exert control over a larger section of society than they did in the pre-global era. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on media, focusing on the impacts of globalization. Thanks for watching.